And thank you to Rory for joining us to talk about really the, I guess, legal imperative, as we called it, for having a Jewish ERG in what's been a changing environment, I think, since the last time we held a little webinar like this, which was just over a year ago. For those that don't know me, my name is Stephen Phillips. I'm the founder and executive director at Jewish ERGs. We are it's kind of crazy to say it, world's largest network of Jewish employee resource group leaders. I know we'll talk a little bit in a second more about how we define ERGs, but for me, we're a group of people that is in some way positively connected to Jews at work and are making an employee group of sort about them doing something positive with the Jews at work. Rory, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Rory Lancman. I'm the Director of Corporate Initiatives and Senior Counsel at the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law. We are a Jewish civil rights organization composed almost entirely of lawyers and legal support staff that is dedicated to protecting and defending Jewish life, be it on college campuses, in public schools, in the workplace, in a union setting, professionals who are experiencing anti-Semitism in their professional environment. And at the Brandeis Center, I focus on anti-Semitism in the workplace. So we represent or counsel individuals across the country, across the United States, from tech workers and global Fortune 10 companies, to union members in legal services fields or elsewhere. So it's good to be with you. I really always shep nachas at your growth since I knew you when this all started, and I'm happy to be as helpful as possible to you and to your membership.
You're always incredibly helpful. It's been a great and fun partnership since we got to meet each other, so I'm always grateful for having you. Before we when Google Meet gets a little bit big, it doesn't handle lots of people very well. So the best way to ask a question is to hit the it looks like an apps button. It's like 9 dots in a square in the bottom right hand corner, and hit Q&A. I know someone has already got there already, so Rory, don't at least one question, and I know you're like desperate for questions. Please use the Q&A feature. We want to make this as interactive as we can within the confines of the fun that is Google Meet. But I think other than that, we should kick off. I've got a question for you, Rory, to begin with, which is, there's a lot of words out there for ERG. You know, I hear of affinity group, BRG, staff network. Every day I learn a new one. How do you define ERG, sort of legal way, and then how are we going to use ERG as we go forward in this little webinar?
So sometimes as lawyers, and those of you who are members and viewers who've interacted with lawyers know that we are capable of seeing the world through a distorted lens of legalistic thinking. So let's start with the reality that I think your members and the participants experience, and that is Jews at a company who find each other in some way, maybe online through the company's internal communication networking processes. Maybe it's just if there's an annual menorah lighting, or just how Jews or people of any identity connect with each other. And then the question becomes, how does that network, that organization with a lowercase o, transform into some kind of activity that looks like it is a real organization? And then the question that follows from that is, where does that fit in the company's description and hierarchy and designation of those organizations? So we at the Brandeis Center, we're here to provide assistance and guidance to Jews and companies who are organizing themselves in whatever way makes sense for them. Now, in many companies, in fact, at this point, I think it's almost every Fortune 500 company, there is a formal affinity group program that is part of that company's DEI regime, whether they call it that or not. And in some companies, there is just one level of employee organization, and it could be called an employee resource group, which is kind of the generic term for these kind of officially recognized identity-based affinity groups. It could be called a business resource group. It can be called an affinity group. It can be called anything, but the defining or the important characteristic of it for this conversation is that it is an organization of people, employees in a company around a particular identity. That identity could be based on race or ethnicity or national origin. It could also be based around interest. So, you could have an African-American ERG, a Hispanic ERG. You could have a women ERG. You could have an LGBTQ ERG. But you can also have ERGs based on, we've seen, for example, veterans, which is not an immutable characteristic of your identity. And there might be an ERG. I think I've seen one for families, so people who like want to try to think about the workplace in a way as it relates to them and their families. But the point is, this group has some recognition from the company. It could be very formal and entail financial support and other operational support from the company. But it is part of the company's effort to, in the best sense, address discrimination and bias in the company, both for its current employees and also for its recruits. ERGs, the existence of ERGs, just like the existence of a DEI program generally, is something that until recently companies would tout as part of their recruitment efforts. But some companies have tiers of ERGs. And so, for example, until recently, Microsoft had top tier, maybe a dozen ERGs, employee resource groups. Below that, and they got funding, they got recognition, they got a proverbial seat at the table. Below that, were something called, I think it was called employee community networks or something like that, which did not get the same kind of funding, did not get the same kind of recognition, did not have the same kind of opportunity to invite speakers and engage in other kind of programming. And we've seen that at a few companies, and just to put a conclusion to this, one of the things that we've done has been helpful in getting the Jewish group of employees that promotion that they've sought from second or third tier affinity group to being a fully recognized employee resource group or business resource group or whatever the thing is called at that company. There's a joke, right? If you have two Jews on a corner, you have three opinions, or two Jews and three opinions, or something like that. Or if there are two Jews at a company and they want to cooperate, coordinate, connect with each other in a way that enhances their experience as employees in any way, shape, or form, we're here to help them out, and they have rights, which I know we'll get into.
So super wide is the answer to that question. I'm sorry, I think my internet decided to drop out for a split second there, so I hope you didn't lose me. So given that, and the really, we're not going to tie down how we define ERG so tightly today. Can you tell us a little bit more about the legal foundation I know your specialty is in the US, and it's fun for me to say with a really British accent being based in England. But I know we've spoken also about more geographically widespread. But tell us a bit in the US about the legal foundation that supports, Jewish, specifically ERGs in the workplace.
So fundamentally, across different laws and statutes that we don't need to get into a level of detail with, when it comes to the workplace, discrimination or different treatment based on race, religion, ethnicity, national origin, there are others, categories depending on what statute you're talking about, is prohibited. And our position, which we have vindicated in every opportunity that we've had to approach a company about elevating their Jewish employee group to the top tier 1 status, is that if you are providing an ERG for employees of different ethnicities, then you need to allow your Jewish employees to have that same opportunity. But what we've seen the most common scenarios when there's a problem is that the company has adopted a policy that we are not going to recognize ERGs based on religious identity. So we'll have an African Americans at XYZ company and Asian Americans and you name it, ethnicities. We might have, we'll almost certainly have women at XYZ company. There may be an LGBTQ group. So we've got race, ethnicity. We've got sexual orientation. We've got sex or gender. But we will not allow any religious-based ERGs. That's problematic for 2 reasons. First of all, it is frankly a question whether or not, because religion is a protected category under federal law, it is an open question whether or not a company can even make that distinction. But for Jewish employees, we are both a religion and an ethnicity. We are not just a set of beliefs, but we are a people. We have a common ancestry. We have a common core, like base language. We have a common national origin to a large extent. We have all of the indicia of an ethnicity, of a people, and not just a set of religious beliefs. And so the legal basis for going to a company and saying you need to allow a Jewish ERG, regardless of what your policy might be about religious ERGs, is that we're not just a religion. So if you're going to have Latinos or Asians or any other ethnic or even racial based identities, you, the company, cannot tell us, the Jewish employees, the basis of our identity. You can't pigeonhole us as merely adherents to a religious belief. You have to accept our identity, identity on our terms, and it's a compelling argument legally. I don't mean just morally or logically. Our laws in the United States universally prohibit discrimination based on race. They may be explicit about prohibiting discrimination based on ethnicity, or they may interpret their race statute to mean ethnicity. But either way, a company can't offer ethnicity an ERG and deny it to ethnicity B. I'll make the observation also, just how true this is. Many of the people that I've counseled at companies across the country, Jews, describe themselves as being either in terms of their belief, atheist, agnostic, irreligious, but they're Jewish. And that's something I understand and I believe. But it's also something that the law recognizes. And I know this, I think we'll get to this as well. The tide is very much turning in favor of that point of view being part of a common understanding of what it means to be Jewish, not just a legalistic one.
I feel like agreeing on what it means to be Jewish is a Jewish disagreement, and we do disagreements really well. So it's like we can't even agree on that. It's two Jews, three opinions. Yet again, I feel like every question ends in the same sort of way, right? I know you and I have spoken a lot about, I talk about it when I'm talking about being four things. We're a culture with an ethnicity, a spirituality, and a religion. And it's hard for people to grasp. I kind of plot us on a graph, and I say you have four limbs, and you can put your limbs anywhere on that graph, and you can move your limbs around on that graph. And I think what's really interesting is even as we move further away from October 7th, we still see that people have shifted and continue to shift how they identify as being Jewish. I say to people all the time, the previously atheist or agnostic Jew that didn't really do anything now lights candles on a Friday night, and when they light those candles, often they say something, and it might not be the prayer, but it could be a prayer or a statement of something, and that's a person that would have told you that they were atheist or agnostic 2 years ago. Like we're an adaptive people, and we change, and I think that's one of the things that makes us, I'm going to say, more fun than just being a religion, is that there's that element of everyone takes to it in their own fun little way. But thinking about, you spoke about the foundation there, but what's the risk? And I know there's a question similarly in the Q&A already, but what are the risks to organizations that fail to support their Jews forming a Jewish ERG?
So the risks are substantial. I will get into a little bit of the weeds, but not too much. First of all, there are at least two federal laws in the United States that prohibit this kind of discrimination in the workplace, both of which allow individuals to file a lawsuit and have a court order the company to do X, Y, and Z, recognize a Jewish ERG, pay damages to the people who've been injured by virtue of there not being an ERG, and in some cases those can be very real because well-developed, fully recognized ERGs can play a significant role in career advancement, in hiring, in real tangible ways. It's not just, not that there's anything, not to diminish it, but it's not just, hey, we want to light menorah on Hanukkah. These things are real, as I'm sure our viewers here know. So, but in addition to that, every state in the country has its own anti-discrimination law on top of the federal law. And many cities, certainly many major cities where corporate headquarters or there's a corporate presence, have their own anti-discrimination laws, and many of them, like for example New York City, where I'm from, those laws are very, very favorable to employees and provide potentially very serious financial consequences for an employer that finds itself on the wrong side of a lawsuit. So, in our assistance with people, we can assist in various ways. I'm sure we'll get into it, but one of those ways is writing directly to the company from the Brandeis Center saying, if you don't mend your ways here, there will be a lawsuit. And that's very significant. I know one of your questions coming up, I think relates to something like what changes have there been, et cetera, et cetera. And not to get ahead of ourselves, but the regulatory environment for companies has become much more friendly to allegations of anti-Semitism, appropriately, especially since companies have done such a poor job of addressing it. So in addition to, Rory Lancman at the Brandeis Center threatening or potentially filing a lawsuit. The federal and state agencies that also play a role in enforcing their respective anti-discrimination laws could get involved. Companies that have state contracts or federal contracts could be at risk of jeopardizing those. So, our experience has been that companies aren't stupid, and once they see that this is going to a bad place, with a real organization taking it there, the cost benefit to fighting us on whether or not we're a people or a faith, or it's just not worth it for them.
So it's not just the PR; it's also the money. It's a whole combination of things, which makes an interesting space. So you jumped.
Yeah. So let me just say this.
No, go for it.
There are many organizations in the Jewish community, thank God, that do great work, and that are in there. Then there, I don't know many, but there are several that are in this space, the ERG space. If I could use a corporate term I detest, but I'm going to use it.
I'll let you off. Just one. That's it.
Thank you. And some of them do really good work about the internal organizing and what an ERG, like how it should function, and all these other kind of like ERG operational things. That's not our thing. Those are very valuable. That's not our thing. Our thing is, as I said at the outset, we're lawyers doing lawyer things. And so if you're coming to us, we're going to give you legal guidance on what your rights are, what the company's obligations are, and if necessary, we're going to take that to the company and say, do this thing or else.
I think that's why we work so well together, because we know where we don't do things, and where you don't do things, and we send each other like a fun game of ping pong across the email pond all the time. You did jump ahead a little bit, but we're going to dig in a little bit more. I'd love to dig in a bit more, given you've touched on at least one recent sort of newsworthy thing I know that's gone on with Microsoft. But have there been, and I'm flicking through the Q&A as well, so I'm going to try and weave a few Q&A bits into this question, but have there been any recent developments, legal or otherwise? I guess the new administration that's not so new anymore in the US is a development that you probably could talk to a little bit, but how have they impacted treatment of Jewish employees and the ability to organize and create ERGs within companies?
So I don't want to get political. I just want to make a kind of a fun observation that it feels like the administration is not new, but it is. It's August. That's not even August 20th. So I don't even think it's like the eighth month. But for good or ill, the Brandeis Center is a nonpartisan organization. It has been a very busy 8 months here in the U.S. when it comes to federal public policy. And with that, I do need to recognize that the most significant change, if you will, development, has been the administration, the federal administration's very clear focus on combating anti-Semitism in college campuses, in schools, in workplaces, which hasn't really gotten the same amount of attention because there's so much focus on what happens on college campuses, and that has had some practical implications. The first is federal anti-discrimination law is enforced by a federal agency called the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That commission has articulated a real strong line against anti-Semitism in the workplace, and the administration as well, not so much in the workplace setting, but nobody wants to be the one to test whether they mean it when it comes to workplaces. as well as they mean it when it comes to colleges or to law firms. This administration is willing, is an understatement, eager to use whatever tool is at its disposal to get what it wants, enforce its view of policy. Let's put it that way. So when we or anyone else is communicating with a company about potential anti-Semitism in the workplace, that company has to knows that the wind is at our back, and that we are making these allegations, these requests, these demands, in the context of a regulatory environment that has never been more friendly towards combating anti-Semitism, and that is significant. The second thing I would say is, as I mentioned earlier, a growing general awareness and acceptance that the Jewish community is a people, that it is diverse, that it is not enough that your yarmulke-wearing employees don't have to come in on Yom Kippur, that anti-Semitism is more complicated than that, which is the third change, but still staying on the second change as part of that, that your Jewish workforce is going to have demands and needs and aspirations that are not defined solely by the handful of employees that you might have who are Jewish and need to have kosher meals at conferences. The third thing tied to that is also a growing awareness, and more importantly, an acceptance, a growing acceptance by courts that anti-Zionist activity, anti-Israel activity can be anti-Semitism that is prohibited under the law. It isn't always, but it's also not never. And does the company really want to be in a position to be telling Jews that anti-Zionism, anti-Israel activity is not anti-Semitism? A number of courts have accepted the anti-Zionism, anti-Israel activity equals anti-Semitism in their circumstances, in the circumstances presented to them, and the courts that have kind of found differently haven't really found differently. They've just not been presented with the right facts and the right circumstances. So whereas several years ago, before October 7th, you would have been very hard pressed to find any cases being adjudicated on the issue of whether or not this anti-Israel, anti-Zionist activity amounts to anti-Semitism. And now there are many, many cases making their way through the courts. And by and large, that view that anti-Zionism can fuel anti-Semitism, can be anti-Semitic and unlawful, has got a foothold. And what company wants to be on the wrong side of that? One last thing, and we'll put this in the category of tooting our own horn a little bit, but it's true. And I can just talk about the public successes. When a company like Adobe, when a company like Microsoft acknowledges that its Jewish employees are entitled to an ERG in the same tier and same status as other employees at their organization, that has both a cascading effect. It has a cascading effect, both because companies want to follow whatever other big companies are doing, but it also gives them those other companies like cover. Well, listen, Microsoft's doing it, and Adobe's doing it, and there are a number of companies that have done it without us having to approach them. So those are some of the changes that are affecting this area.
I'm going to push that last example one step further, thanks to a conversation I had today, actually, that you set up, but we won't go into who, but it's actually encouraged people to stand up and be counted. If it's happening at Adobe, why don't we have an ERG? Maybe I should start an ERG. We should do something. So I always find it really interesting the way that everything works in different ways, and one small, stone makes a big ripple in the ocean. And I'm grateful to you for the work that you did both on Adobe and Microsoft, because it's really set a different, the headwind was behind us, but I feel like we're really sort of picking up momentum a little bit more than we perhaps had been before, because just that media exposure as well is really important to make it clear that we are here, we want to have equal treatment, and just talking about it is important. And I'll just touch very quickly back on something you said before about, talking about what it means to be Jewish. I think we have a personal, everyone has our own little sort of, I don't want to say responsibility, but it's a thing that I feel strongly about, and I feel strongly about equipping people to be ready to talk about what it means to be Jewish, because people just often don't know. There's so many questions in the Q&A about, their company pigeonholing us into just being a religion. And I think it's important that we all learn how to talk about sort of how to be Jewish in the way that isn't just the guy that wears the kippah and needs a kosher sandwich at the conference, or not to work on Rosh Hashanah. So to me, it's one of the things that makes us, it's the beautiful thing about being Jewish is we all do it in our own fun little way.
And particularly in the workplace, it's so important for everybody to support each other and to not judge each other, and that goes in both directions and in all directions. I hate this construction, but I'm going to do it. And I don't want to be melodramatic about it, so I'll give the non-melodramatic version. But
you're Jewish, it kind of goes with the thing, the melodramatic. So
yeah, the anti-Semites are not going to make a distinction between the guy with the kippah and the guy without the kippah and the young woman with the tattoos. They're not going to make a distinction. And so, there's a time and a place for us as Jews to argue, debate the right way to do things, whatever. Don't bring that into the workplace. Trust me, if somebody who is being Jewish in a way that's different than you are being Jewish is experiencing discrimination or unequal treatment, what else has our history taught us except, trust me, they're coming for you next.
It's the piece that I know you've heard me say before. I always say it sounds like a bad joke. You never hear the Nazi bang on the door, pull the woman out of bed and say, "What did you eat for breakfast?" And she says, "I have a bacon sandwich every day." And the Nazi never says, "When did you last go to synagogue?" And she says, "Oh, haven't been in 6 years." He never says go back to bed. He just sends her out into the square and sends her on her way to whichever horrific place she's going to. And that's just the sad reality of life. And I absolutely agree. You have to just bring us all together in whatever way. There's no right way of doing it. There's no wrong way of doing it. If we're suffering, we're all going to suffer. And we have to just play that sort of momentum together. And I guess that brings us on kind of nicely to the next question that I had down for you, which is just to talk about some practical steps. And I feel like this is one that we're going to both have some little thoughts on, but practical steps that Jewish employees can take to encourage their employer to do the right thing and help them form a Jewish ERG. I'm thinking both sort of on the advocacy side, but also, if necessary, can you tell us a little bit about what the legal channels and steps would look like?
Sure. So one thing that I say to everyone who comes to speak to me to ask about their situation is that the culture of your company better than I do, and what is the right path. What I can do is give some insight into what often works, what often doesn't work, but once I give you a menu of options, which I'll tell you what they are, but once I give you those menu of options, you're going to know what is more likely to succeed, what is more likely to get the company to make progress. And very simply, it kind of comes down to the interpersonal dynamics and relationships. At one company I'm thinking of, we were contacted by a group of Jewish employees, one of whom was very senior in the company. So this person was not someone looking at the bottom and how do I communicate with important people? This person is an important person. And then also, and I'm very cognizant of this. Before I was focused entirely on anti-Semitism, I had done employment law, just representing employees who were discriminated against based on you name it. And it's universally true that while I can tell you and assure you that retaliation for complaining of discrimination or asserting your employment rights is not just illegal, it's very illegal. Like it's easier to make a retaliation claim than it is to make the underlying claim of the discrimination itself. But with that said, people have to judge for themselves what the risk is at their company, whether it's worth it, whether or not the fact that if you are retaliated against, you can get a lawyer and file a lawsuit, whether that makes sense. So here are kind of the options if you're coming to us. We will help you communicate your message in your voice from you to the company. So you may not want to go to what the next level would be a letter from the Brandeis Center. That's upping the temperature, it's raising the temperature. Now the company, maybe you'll feel that you've been in dialogue, and even though you're a little frustrated, having us get involved would just you want to give them a chance, another chance to do the right thing. And so we'll draft a letter for you. You'll put it in your name. You'll put it in your voice. You'll make edits or whatever. But at the core of it will be the legal, an explanation of the legal obligation that the company has to do the thing that you want them to do. Next level is the letter will come from us. And we will not identify the names of the individuals at the company. We will say, dear company executive, we're writing on behalf of Jewish employees at XYZ, at your company, XYZ company, and who want the following things. And we will always say, here's why they want them, because we've never been approached by employees who want a Jewish ERG where there isn't also an anti-Semitism problem at the company. It may be severe, it may be less severe, but they're not going to the trouble of calling the Brandeis Center just because they want an ERG because they like those letters. There's a problem which they think an ERG can contribute to solving, which we believe that a Jewish ERG can contribute to solving. The next stage, and we would put this in the letter, is most likely we would file a complaint on behalf of those employees, but still not naming them, with the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and or whatever state agency exists in the state where they are, if the state laws are more favorable than the federal laws. And then if that doesn't work, then ultimately we would file a lawsuit, most likely in federal court. And again, in the lawsuit, we would not name by name the individual employees at the company, although in that lawsuit, the company would have the right to know at least a few of those names, because they have a right to kind of test whether or not we're just making it up that we have representing employees. So those are that's kind of like the hierarchy of how we we would assist a group of Jewish employees.
It's the options. It's something to order from, and I guess you can go start wherever you feel on that, or you can sort of start from the bottom and work up to the top. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing is, once we write a letter, that letter is going to contain an express threat. Nice legal words, but unambiguous. And you need to be prepared to go through with that. You don't have to start there. You could start with your own letter, or it doesn't have to be a letter, it could be email, however you want to communicate it. We will help you frame it, at least the part of it. We'll do two things: frame the legal rationale for why you're entitled to the thing you're asking, but also help you frame and catalog the anti-Semitism that you've experienced, because that's important also. So for legal reasons, it's actually helpful that the company be concerned that the anti-Semitism at the company also might provide an independent, claim. It may or may not, but they should see that presented in one document.
I think it's a reminder to me, though, that as every lawyer I seem to talk to, and I seem to talk to a lot of lawyers in this world now, I don't really know why, but they always say that there's a lot of things you can do without litigation. Like, you hear the word lawyer and you think lawsuit, and that's not always the case. Like, the letter is a good start. It is, as you said, a carefully worded threat, effectively, but that's an important step. It's not a lawsuit, and it can, well, we've seen it actually have the right outcome.
All of our representation has ended at the letter stage. We're prepared to sue. In one case, with a very recognizable name, the complaint was drafted, and then we had a positive resolution. So, so far we're batting 100 with either drafting letters or communications that employees send on their own behalf, like the company never knows the Brandeis Center is involved, or Brandeis Center direct letters.
We're winning, and I don't think we say that very often, but I'm going to make that as a bold statement, because the same with us as Jewish ERGs. I've helped write a number of letters, notes, missives, emails now, and I'm pretty confident that we're on the positive trajectory as opposed to the hitting the brick walls. We've got 15 minutes left, and I am conscious of some popular and amazing Q&A in there, but I'm going to ask you one more quick question from the bank that we thought about, and then I'll open the Q&A. You can still add your Q&A by going in the little app button in Q&A, but how do you suggest organizations can balance support for Jewish ERGs with the sort of broader, was originally diversity, equity, inclusion, now belonging, a lot of people are saying, and the other groups? And I know there's a few questions actually in the Q&A about this, but how does that balance play out? How have you seen that balancing play out?
So, one of the things we have gotten to asking the Jewish employees that we're counseling is, what if we send this letter? What if we communicate with the company and they say, you know what, forget it. We're not having any DEI program at all. We're not having any ERG program at all. And you see this at the university level and at the employee company level, that institutions are scaling back their DEI because of the political social environment that we're in right now. So, our view at the Brandeis Center as a legal matter is, we don't have a position on whether you should have a DEI program or not, whether you should have an ERG program or not, but whatever you do, the Jews have to be treated equally. My view of the value of an ERG program, of having an ERG, a Jewish ERG, if there is an ERG program. I'll just go back to a metaphor I used earlier, which is having a seat at the table. So if a company's going to have a DEI program, and they're all going to have some kind of DEI program in whatever they call it, right? They're going to have something. You want to make sure that there's anti-Semitism training alongside anti-racism training. You want to make sure that whatever other groups are getting, Jews are getting their fair share. one company said to me, well, if we do a Jewish ERG, we're going to have to do a Muslim ERG, which again was kind of like we're not just a religion. So no, you don't have to do that. But we don't take a position on like whether others should get an ERG or not. And our experience has been that Muslim employees are going to express themselves, whether it's through some ERG that they fit into. A lot of companies have Middle East, North Africa, MENA ERGs, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you're having an anti-Semitism problem at your company, and if it's coming from or driven in some way by a particular other identity group, it would be a mistake to think that pushing for your rights is going to give them rights, and now you've really opened the floodgates. With that said, I think that many Jewish employees would be happy to completely shut down any kind of like political advocacy, et cetera, in the office whatsoever. But one last thing. It's been my observation that it's kind of tangential to your question. It's been our observation that so-called interfaith groups don't work, right? So the company will come back and say, all right, we're not doing a Jewish ERG, but we're going to do an interfaith, people of all faiths, so that within that, Jews, Muslims, Catholics, whoever wants to, be a part of it. We have not seen that work for Jewish employees. That interfaith ERG just becomes a microcosm of the anti-Semitism and unequal treatment and bullying that exists at the company writ large. And it's not exactly your question, but related.
And that wasn't really tangential because you really answered one of the questions in the Q&A. So you did the telepathic work without doing it. And I'll add to that I've seen the same thing. I saw it personally. I've seen it in experience talking to other Jewish ERG leaders. I've actually seen it when the Jewish subgroup is sort of stuck inside that ethnic faith the faith subgroup. The thing for me that I often say is that I felt uncomfortable both as a Jew and as someone that is pretty sure they're kind of agnostic, starting a call with a prayer to somebody that even if I did believe isn't the person that I believe in. Like, it just made me feel a little bit icky at best. And so because of that, it put me off actually joining the interfaith stuff, and therefore I missed out on the Jewish related stuff that went with it. So I think you pretty much, you knew that question was coming, and it was impressive that you got in there before I had to ask you it. So it was good. I'm going to sort, because we've got 10 minutes, I'm going to sort them by popularity. So if you are voting in that Q&A, please click the little thumbs up to give some questions if you really want to ask the top one. The one that's top at the moment, and I know we've covered this a little bit, but I think there's an interesting question in there still just to explore, is how do you get past leadership in the diversity space that says that a Jewish group is too complicated and can lead to other groups wanting? How do you recommend, maybe without the litigious hat on, that we help them understand that our identity is more than just religious?
Right. So if you have presented that information to the DEI team, DEI management, and they are not accepting it, this is a question in terms of internal strategy and advocacy, et cetera, that Stephen, you probably would be better suited than I would, having worked in.
I knew you were gonna throw it back on me.
But there's such a thing as I want to speak to your supervisor. You are within your rights to take problems all the way up to the tippy top. And I know that the premise of this question was, aside from the Brandeis Center, writing to the company. But when we do write to the company, we write to the CEO and we write to the chief HR person, to different terms at different companies. And so, it's sad to say, you all wouldn't know this, Stephen does, but I had a prior life, it's not even that prior, of being a very liberal, progressive, Democratic elected official, both in New York City and New York State. So I say this with a heavy heart that it's almost always the case when Jewish employees are reaching out to us that they've experienced either a willful indifference or hostility from their DEI team program. Now, not every company is reaching out to the Brandeis Center, so maybe there are DEI teams out there that are doing a good job and doing the right thing. And I think that that's changing also as companies are more mindful of who they hire and what their expectations are of their DEI teams. But I'm not surprised. I'm never surprised to hear that the DEI folks are a problem, if not the problem. I will tell you, if you take it to a higher level, you are protected under the law from retaliation, from being disciplined for that, because you're complaining about a form of discrimination that the chain as far as you took it has not resolved. So you're not required to just like sit down and shut up.
So you can ask to speak to the manager. It's just like being in the supermarket when things go wrong. And I will add to that because we also have some resources as well that have been really useful and have had success in just explaining a little bit. Sometimes it's I read about this a little while ago, but there's what I think of the traditional anti-Semitism, the no blacks, no dogs, no Jews pasted on a sign on the wall. And then the sort of more like anti-Semitism of the unknowing, where people just don't know who we are, why what they've said or what they've suggested is actually anti-Semitic, and do that little bit of education on like, hi, we're not just a religion. Sometimes it goes a really long way and it comes from a place of just not knowing. I'm going to move us on because there's more questions. I think this is a quick one that you can do in like a 2-second answer, because I think I know the answer, but I'm not the lawyer and I'm definitely not the US lawyer. So what are the federal laws that prohibit discrimination on allowing an ERG based on a specific group or ethnicity?
So there are two. There is, first and foremost, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That is the main civil rights law that protects against discrimination in employment, which is Title VII, on university campuses, which is Title VI, really covers all federally funded programs. And the second is the Civil Rights Act of 1866. After the Civil War, there were a number of civil rights laws that were passed, and that law prohibits discrimination in many things, but employment being one of them, and both of them are very powerful federal laws.
It's an old colleague and friend of mine used to say, I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on video calls all the time. I could have answered it. It's like, I know, I'm doing well. Moving on. This is a fun one because it's not entirely on topic, but I think it's an important thing to talk about, and maybe there's a further conversation. How do you successfully navigate a conversation with your company's DEI team where you feel that the potential programs, both substantive and logistically, for your newly formed Jewish ERG are being scrutinized or handled differently than the programs of other ERGs, but you don't want to accuse them of discrimination?
So I'll give you the legal answer, and the legal answer is you do need to accuse them of discrimination, but you don't need to use, j'accuse. You don't need to say, I accuse you of discrimination. You could say, and this feels unequal to me. It feels like the same standards aren't being applied. Whatever, pull out the thesaurus, and whatever feels softest and less threatening to you, that conveys the notion that we are being treated differently than group A, B, and C. You should kind of get that out there. But Stephen, I would then from there I would defer to you about how you massage the IP.
I think it is that, massage. I always say make sure you've got great examples of where you can see that there's been a different thing. I've seen it again personally, and in talking to people, there's this scrutiny on speakers that some groups get and other groups don't get, and I think having a good examples of that is a good example. I'd add to your thesaurus, Rory, that I love the use of Rabbi Dr. ChatGPT. He or she is a great guy, super useful in writing emails like that, because you can say to it, like, make it sound less accusatory, or make it sound less like, heavy-handed. And I think it's a really great tool that can be used actually in our benefit. I don't believe it's as anti-Semitic as a lot of people make out, and I think there's a lot of great work being done to de-anti-Semitic any GPT models that are a little bit anti-Semitic, but we digress.
Well, in that spirit, my chat GPT, my voice, I set to a woman with an English accent, just because whatever she tells me just sounds so much more authoritative.
We don't know what we're talking about. We just speak nicely. I can't say anything like that. We made the language. You guys ruined it. Anyway, moving swiftly on the last 3 minutes. I think we have dug into that one a little bit. Question for you, and it might be one that comes back on me, but is there a equivalent legal support to the Brandeis Center available for UK-based companies?
I do recall referring maybe you, Stephen, or someone you had sent our way to a similar organization in the UK. Do you remember them?
Off the top of my head, no. But there are a few different, I don't know specifically who you sent to me. If it's Israel-based, if the discrimination in the workplace is Israel-based, then UK Lawyers for Israel are pretty hot on that. There's Campaign for Anti-Semitism. I've also done some work with the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust, and while they don't have, it's not so much legal support like the Brandeis Center does a heavy-handed or heavier-handed, I'll say, letter and that sort of thing, really more involved, but they can help you with the UK law and writing that letter and getting there. I will dig out who it was that you sent. We spoke about. I know we've spoken about it in the past, Rory, and I'll make sure I follow up with that to tie it in. We've got 2 minutes left. Let's have a look at what else is going in there. I saw one down a little bit less voted up, and I'm interested, so I'm going to go with it, especially given, Rory, that your specialty is New York. So I'm going to give you 1 minute, and then I'm going to find one more thing to ask you. But how could the election of Mamdani affect Jewish employees? Even if his legal reach is limited, his influence is not.
Yeah, it could be very significant. And I've spoken about this wearing my different hat, my not Brandeis Center hat, but my Brandeis Center hat. I will say that the New York City human rights law is very powerful. There is a New York City Human Rights Commission whose efficacy has ebbs and flows depending on who's mayor and how seriously they take it. And Mayor Adams, our current mayor, this year formally adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, the IRA definition, which is very important because it's the definition that talks about Zionism and the role of anti-Israel expression that could be anti-Semitism. So, taking it out of Mamdani specifically to keep it non-political, a mayor whose vision of anti-Semitism does not include the IRA definition, does not include accepting that anti-Zionist, anti-Israel activity can be a form of anti-Semitism, can be very, very harmful to Jewish New Yorkers, and at the very least is certainly missing a very, very important tool that Jewish New Yorkers can rely on to get redress for anti-Semitism that is short of, going to file a lawsuit, which is a big, expensive proposition unless you get a pro bono firm like us to do it. So, in the legal sense, not just in the political sense, it could be very problematic to have a mayor who doesn't see anti-Semitism the way that we see it.
So it could be some fun. What a happy and light note to end this webinar on. I want to give you a big thank you for coming to talk to us. I will take the rest of the Q&A, and maybe we'll have a little look through and see if we can craft some answers to go out with the recording of this. I know you've popped your details in the chat for people to contact you. I'll make sure that goes out there as well. Please, anyone feel free to reach out with questions, or if you want an introduction to Rory, if you didn't get his email address, you know where to find me. And thanks everyone for coming.